You know what time it is.
What's up, beer people?
If you heard it on the hashtag beer time, it's true.
It must be true.
It's true. It is fact. Please, won't you name one of your beers Cart Horse?
And just do something terrible. Just brew a shit beer.
Stick your finger in there every now and again.
Stir it with a sock.
Every show, it feels like my first show.
Every show is a new adventure.
Did I make sense there? I think I did.
I love them all.
Hello folks, welcome to another episode of Hashtag Beer Time. In this one, we got to sit down with beer legend Mr. John Keeling. Now, John is known for his time spent as head brewer of Fuller's Brewing, which is the oldest standing independent brewery in London. Although John is stepping away from Fuller's, he will still be in the brewing scene as he steps into the role of chairman at London Brewers Alliance, which is an organization that looks after the common interest of independent London breweries. In the show, we got to taste 3 beers, very tasty beers. The London Pride, the ESB or English Special Bitter, and then the London Porter, arguably the flagship of all porters around the world. John shared a huge amount of knowledge and experience with us in the show, and it was an absolute pleasure having him in the studio. So, without further ado, I will get on with it and let you enjoy the show, and I hope you enjoy it. Cheers.
Guys, it is Friday, and it is hashtag beer time with me, T-Bone Troy. I'm joined by co-host Murray Middleton. Mazza, welcome.
T-Bone, always good to be here. Thanks for having me again.
How does that sound? Because
crystal clear.
Crystal clear.
I don't know. I think so. I don't know.
So, you're probably listening, wondering why are these guys on the show? We usually have our Tuesday slots. Two reasons. One, I wrote an exam on Tuesday. I finished. I passed.
Well done.
At least I think I passed.
We holding you to that.
I left the studio. I left the exam early, which is I've never done before.
It's either a really good sign or a really bad sign.
I'm hoping it was a good sign. And the second reason is that we've got a very special guest in Cape Town at the moment, Mr. John Keeling from Fuller's Brewery. Welcome to Cape Town and welcome to Hashtag Beer Time.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
So just a bit of background. I know that it's customary on the show to crack open a beer first off, but we got some beers from our friend Brad who dropped them off. Maybe they British temperatures. Could I say that? Is that the room temperature? They're not. They could be.
It's below room temperature.
Yes.
There's a myth about British beer being too warm. It's not. It's about 11 to 13 is a good temperature for cask beer.
Yeah.
You know, if you're getting up to 15, 16, it's too warm.
Would there be, just a side tangent, would there be any beers that you could serve warm? I mean, besides we've got some of those Belgian beers which you actually meant to warm up
I think, you know, some of our stronger beers like the Vintage Ale and like the Brewers Reserve, which we maybe try later. They're really nice. I leave them in the fridge, pull them out for about 20 minutes before I'm going to serve them. Then I put them into like a brandy glass so they do warm up in your hand. And as they do warm up, they do reveal more about themselves.
No, that's spot on. A little bit about yourself and the research that Mazza and I have done, and Fuller's Brewery. Am I correct in saying it's the oldest existing brewery in London?
Yeah. I think with the oldest and the biggest, though, being big in London now isn't really, you know, all the big breweries have got out of London, and I think for a while London was in danger of becoming a city of banks and shops, and industry was vacating London because it was expensive real estate, etc., etc. But now we've got things like this new wave of craft brewing coming into London, and they're brewing in all sorts of odd little places underneath railway arches, and I think it's great. They're bringing an industry back to London where it should always be. You know, I think London is one of the great cities of the world, and it's great because there's this mixture of people doing things. I'd hate for London just to be a city of banks and shops. It would be boring then.
I spent 2 years there, and I can think of nothing worse than just having the banks everywhere.
Bank shops and accountants. Oops,
Yeah.
Sorry if there's any accountants out there.
People are going to start diverting their trips from London.
Exactly.
Stop the hop off.
Now, just in that short paragraph or words that you said. I've got so many questions to ask you, and we'll try and keep the show structured, as I've been told by a station manager. Try and not go off onto a tangent too many times. But I'd like the listeners to know, because I mean we do have a myriad of listeners on the show. I know that's a word being thrown around quite a bit.
And this is probably also the accountant's slots.
Yes.
Friday 12 o'clock slots.
So we get some beer nerds listening. We also get just the general folk listening. And I just want to introduce you in terms of your history. From what I know, you started at Fuller's in 1999 as the head brewer. Is that correct?
No, I've been working for Fuller since 1981.
My apologies.
But I became a head brewer in 1999. I was promoted then, and I've been a head brewer brewing director since then. And I've just recently relinquished a lot of the day-to-day running of the brewery to Georgina Young, who funny enough, when I was promoted in 1999, everybody sort of shuffled up a place. And Georgina was the first person I hired.
Okay,
my
great.
first decision in my new role. And then my last decision really has been to say to the board, I think Georgina is the right person to take over from me.
And that's been a year since you stepped down as head
sort
director.
of, yeah, it's been a little bit of handing over of stuff and whatever. I don't think you ever, lose responsibilities and whatever. You always care about it, but you have to move on and find new things and allow Georgina to expand into the space that you previously occupied, and she will do things different to me and improve on what I've done.
Yeah.
And that is the good thing, and that's why I have so much confidence in her and the new team that's going there. That they don't really need me now, so I've got to go and find something new to do, which is come to South Africa and have a good time.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely come to the right part of South Africa. You've been here for a week, bit of a whirlwind. Sorry, Maza, you had something.
No, I was just going to say, am I correct in saying the same position? Your first hire was Georgina, and now she's your last appointment. That was the same thing that happened to you.
Yeah, it did happen to me. The previous brewing director was a guy called Reg Drury. He was 40 years before this, and he did 18 years as brewing director. And his first decision was to hire me, which he did in January 1981. And his last decision was to recommend me to the board.
That's fantastic. It's a
brewing
great
director.
Cyclical version of how things work. I'm sure Georgina will probably do the same sort of thing.
I think that's, if you're a brewery that's successful in making good beer, you want to grow your own brewing director, head brewer, because who knows London Pride better than them?
Exactly.
If you bring somebody from the outside, how do they know the beers we're making? If they're not working those beers and they're not that good, then you want somebody to come in and make some changes.
Yeah.
But it's steady hand on the tiller. The changes that we're making are more long-term and strategic and making new beers, and not London Pride's no good, what we're going to do about it, etc.
Exactly, yeah. It's a much better position to be in.
Yeah, easy.
We've gone 10 minutes into the show, which is a record without having a beer. So I think we need to do this.
Yeah.
And
I mean, a recommendation on order from John.
Yes. So I mean, when I wrote up my blog post for this, we mentioned Fuller's, I mentioned London Pride. It's a household name.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think of British beer, you get transported to maybe a handful of breweries in London, in the UK, and I mean this is a part of the UK heritage.
Well, I think all great beers have a great story behind them, and that beer has been brewed by lots of brewers, and we make it all the time. Also, there's people in London who've been drinking London Pride longer than I've been drinking. So they're the real experts on what London Pride should be tasting like. So you always have to remember that, it is the customer that counts as much as anybody else, and you have to listen. I love going to the pubs and hear people talk about the beers I make. So London Pride is by far our most popular beer, but it's got some really nice stories about it. It was launched in 1959.
I was just about to ask, was it your first beer? But
no, it's a long time before me. And
you weren't around then.
I wasn't making beer at that point. And Fuller's ran a competition saying we've got this new beer coming out, but we haven't got a name for it. Would you like to try and have a go at naming it? And this guy thought of the name London Pride, and we thought that was a really good name. And he won a barrel of beer every year for the rest of his life.
Jeez, that is an incredible prize.
Yeah,
and a barrel
I
is
think he lived till he was 95. Yeah, so it cost us a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think, great. And we asked him, why did you name it London Pride? And he said there's a flower called London Pride.
Okay.
And it was named London Pride as the flower because it was the first flower to grow on the bomb sites during the Second World War.
Jeez, that's great.
So it was a badge of London's courage in standing up to the bombing.
Yeah.
And that's why the flower was called London Pride. And if you Google it, Noel Coward actually wrote a song about the flower called London Pride. So we were more than pleased to get that. And I think when names just fit and work.
Yeah.
London Pride. Black Cab Stout really works for me.
Yeah.
A London dark beer called Black Cab. That's the best
Yeah.
name for a London dark beer. So sometimes you get the names perfect. Sometimes you don't.
I never knew that about the London Pride, the flower story. That makes it
It's
got a
it's
huge
great history.
because he would have been. I'm sure he would have been affected quite greatly by the war, and something like that would have been, whether it was his parents who were there, or he was there, or it's got a lot behind it.
I think
But it's nice when the name has a real story and
Yeah.
a meaning,
Yeah.
and beyond the recipe, beyond the recipe.
I think we're starting to see that now in the local craft beer scene in South Africa, where guys are starting to push for different names. I mean, the easiest example was Zulu Blonde, which started. I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but it might be like 8 years ago, 10 years ago,
Yeah, probably.
and they only exported to the UK. It was a Durban-based brewery, and they just exported to the UK, and it didn't distribute in South Africa, and it just took off. It became known as one of the most successful microbreweries at the time, and we're getting people who are doing that now in Cape Town, coming up with different names. We've got, Tafel Mountain. We've got Soweto, which is obviously a big example. Devil's Peak, yeah. So people are starting to incorporate clever names into their beer. So almost like there's a real estate of names.
There's a reason. You don't... I think...
It's got to go beyond that. It's somehow, if the craft beer revolution is to mean anything, there must be some part of South Africa in your beer if you're a South African brewer. Same as this part of London in our beer because we're a London brewery. And I think if I was to live in South Africa and make beer, I would make beer different to how I make it in London.
Sure.
And that's because I'm in a different culture, I'm in a different environment, and you've got to reflect that culture. And what I've liked is definitely the South African craft beer does have this. It does have some of South Africa in it. It's not just, an imitation of American beer. The styles can be American,
Sure.
but there can be something in there.
Anything specific that you...
I've noticed. First, I went over to see Nick at Soul Barrel, and he was using South African ingredients in some of his beer, and I think there is some unique South African ingredients
Sure.
you can use. But also, I think it's an attitude as well. If I was to compare directly American IPAs to some of the IPAs I've drank here, I think the South African ones have almost a better balance to them. There's more like a malt in there rather than just being hoppy.
Yeah.
I mean, the Americans make great beer, don't get me wrong, but and I would say to my brewers at Fuller's, we're going to turn this into a Fuller's beer. You might find this is an impressive style, but somehow we have to make it. And we always go for balance, and I've noticed that is in the South African IPAs too.
It was interesting. Sorry, T-Bone. I read what you said. This sort of process that happens with the beers, the traditional, like great London beers, like your London Pride, gets taken by a brewery like Stone. I think you said, and they'll just like pump it up, and they'll make it like. Pump it full of malt and make it huge.
Well, I mean, the Americans are great because they will take influence and turn it into the beer that they want to make.
Yeah.
And I think that some of my friends in America, great brewers, I remember Mitch Steele from Stone. He's been tweeting me with looking at pints of London Pride saying I'm just about to drink this. And, because he likes cask beer as well. And, and I must admit he's made some great beers too, and he knows more about IPAs than I do. But you know, you've got Garrett Oliver at Brooklyn. What a great sort of mouthpiece for American brewing is Garrett, and all these make great beer, but they're definitely in the American style. So I always jokingly say to them, you know, you turn everything up to 11, but we English are much more subtle. And that's the difference between Americans and English people. English people are subtle.
I was going to say it reflects 100% on the people drinking them. I mean, the Americans are like bold and loud, and the British are far more subtle and quiet and like more like easygoing, and like, not that the Americans aren't great. There's just the American styles are just bigger and better, and the English are just more toned down and balanced.
More well-mannered.
I think a beer like London Pride, it's not big and bold and whatever, and it doesn't shout at you. But what it does, it waits for you to talk to it, and then it will have a conversation with you instead.
One word I did want to pick up on that I have heard you speak about is drinkability.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I had a sip of this, that word came to mind. I mean, it's just to put a little bit more focus onto this beer. It does have that malty. It's leading toward the chewiness that some of the malt forward beers have, but this is, I mean,
there's still a distinct bitterness,
drinkability,
and there's fruitiness in there as well from the fermentation. I think the balance is good. It's only 4.7, so it's not massive, big beer. And what that does, I think, is it gives you the ability. In the pub, they're designed to be drunk in the pub, and you know, that's been the traditional English drinking occasion is the pub. So we go drinking in the pub, and we want to drink 4 or 5 pints and not fall over, be able to hold a sensible conversation. So, and that's what a beer like London Pride is able to do.
Yeah.
And because it's nuanced, and because you know, it has a personality and character, it doesn't always say the same thing to you every time.
Sure.
It will say something different to you occasionally, and I think that's great fun because that's the personality of the drink. You know, today it might say, you know, I'm a little bit more fruity today.
Sure.
And you'd notice that, and that's interesting. The first 2 or 3 sips always say to you, I'm London Pride.
Is this your flagship beer? This is
by far our most popular beer.
Yeah, okay.
And you know, it does really well in our pubs, and it does really well as a cask beer in our pubs.
You can see why. If you're drinking it, it doesn't have to be cooler weather, but it fits perfectly with our climates, I think. But you can see with that extra maltiness and that slight chewiness, it is perfect for like a cooler day than we've got today.
Yeah. No, this.
Or when you're in an air-conditioned office.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm definitely going to get a few more bottles from you.
Yeah.
Just
if you could have a lifetime supply if you were just a few years
earlier. Maybe Metal Lane should run a competition.
Yeah, 6-pack a month.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I know. You use your thesaurus these days to come up with your new names. Do you? No. Anyway, I wanted to move or shift gears from this beer and talk about beers that are a little bit older. And what I quite like what you guys have done is you've mixed the old with the new. You've realized that you've got a bit of history. Fullers have a bit of history on their side, and they're maybe not as flexible or I don't know if fast-paced is the right word, but as some of the newer upcoming brewers. So you've said, how can we compete, or how can we adapt to this? And from what I understand, that's why you've reintroduced your 1914 recipes, your reserve beers.
Yeah.
Could you just tell us the thinking behind that?
Well, you know, as you say, we have a history, and it's nice to go back into that history and take recipes from that history and see, because also there's an emotional attachment to the past as well.
Sure.
So we've made a beer from 1966, which we did that with the last World Cup football World Cup, because 1966 was the last time England won the World Cup.
Seems like years ago.
And so, I thought that would sell really well in Scotland, but maybe not. The Scots don't like the English football team that much.
You're originally from Manchester.
I am, yes. But I was doing the research and I got the 1966 book out, looking through it, and there was a tap on my shoulder, and it was Brendan Bay, one of our brewers. I said, "What are you doing, John?" And I said, well, "We're going to brew a beer from '66. I think it's this one, the Strong Ale." And he said, "Oh, I brewed that one."
Oh, really?
So he was there in '66 and he made that beer. I said, "Guess what, Brendan? You're going to make this one too."
Fantastic.
So,
Oh, wow.
So you had that history there. So he had an attachment to it. So through him, we all had an attachment to it. But there's been other beers too that been in. I thought when we brewed the 1914 beer, that was very sort of emotional for us, because that was the beginning of the First World War, and there was lots of regiments based around Fuller's, the Middlesex and the Surrey regiments that would have gone to fight in France, and maybe that was the last English beer they ever drank. And when you drink it and you think those thoughts, you just think, wow.
It's important.
That's heavy, and
And it was brewed in exactly the same place, exactly the same recipe,
Yeah.
and drunk in the same place.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah,
heavy
that's
when you
really
think
heavy,
when you think about it, and it's quite interesting. Someone might invite you back in 20 years' time to brew the 1999 beer, or the millennial beer or something like that.
It'd be something like that. But that's what beer can do. You see, but beer is not just about the recipe and drinking the beer. It is about being with your friends. It's a social occasion. It is maybe from time to time having those heavy thoughts about something, or sometimes those light thoughts. But it fits into the occasion so well, and it brings something to those occasions.
Yeah, we were
Another beer?
Yeah. We also normally say if you trying beers and you're giving them a profile and you're giving them a smell and a taste, that in itself, apart from it being an occasion in itself, those sometimes take you back and they transport you back in time to a sweet I used to eat or this or that. So it does so much more than it just being.
Well, as they say, you remember tastes and smells much more effectively than anything else. So, a taste or a smell can take you back in time.
Yeah.
So the next beer we're going to have is the Fuller's Extra Special Bitter.
Yeah.
And, I mean, also again, I'm taking a few notes from a podcast that I look up to very fondly, Good Beer Hunting, and you guys spoke about some of the issues that you're facing in the UK scene. One of the issues that we're currently facing in the craft beer scene in South Africa is the perception of what an ale is. Mm-hmm. And when you ask the majority of South Africans, would you like an ale to drink, their mind goes immediately to the bitter beer that is poured from the taps in the cask beers.
But it compounds when what John said is everyone has this perception that it's like a 17-degree beer.
Yeah.
They think warm ale.
Yeah.
So the ale immediately triggers warm, dark, like bitter.
I think that's from when when South Africans were still allowed to go work in the UK, that their 2-year visa, they used to go over, they used to order a pint of beer, pour the cask, and that was their...
And it was so different from what you used to. And it's like anything else. I would also say, ESB, like beers that are strongly flavoured with hops, and they can be quite bitter. Bitterness is an important taste, I think, to acquire, because it's a very cleansing flavour, so that it helps your taste buds, and that's one of the reasons why they are drinkable, because it does refresh your taste buds so much. But I always say to people, look, you have to want to like it. You have to acquire it. You have to acquire it. So all you have to do is drink a full glassful every night for 6 months, and then you will love it. That's all you have to do. Take any Fuller's beer, drink a glass every night for 6 months, and you will
I would say less
it.
than 6 months and you'd be in.
When I was 18,
I prefer it when it's 12 months. A glass for every night for 12 months.
Sure.
because that helps the sales a lot more.
I was going to say, I mean, it's that's a long time. You're going to be getting a lot of sales in that one glass.
That's
It's beautiful. Hey, they've both got the London Pride and this ESP have just got such strong golden colours.
Yeah.
They're
So
so bright.
I mean, Fuller's have been around for a while. They've had some time to work on a few things and iron out some crinkles.
You know, I would say to people who haven't drunk ale or a lot of ale, it is very similar to how you would approach red wine. You don't drink. Not too many people drink red wine straight out of the fridge, and they allow it to breathe, and that's maybe what you should do with ale.
No, this is spot on. So this is we could call this maybe the bigger brother of the London Pride.
Very much so. It's
or bigger sister.
Stronger. It's 5.9. So London Pride is 4.7 that we drank, and this is 5.9. So it's got a little bit more strength. We brew on for these beers on what's called a Party Gal system, which enables us to make 3 different beers from the same recipe, which is ESB, London Pride, and Chiswick. The difference between them is strength, and the fermentation is very, very different, because if you have more sugar in the fermentation, which is what gives the beer its strength, the yeast will react differently and produce different flavours. So that's what's interesting for these beers, is they're all related. They're useful as yeast. The recipe is fairly standard, but because their fermentations are different, it gives those different flavours. ESB, if anything, is even more fruity than London Pride.
Can I ask a question, John, about the Fuller's yeast? So that strain, is that a strain that has been
around?
Like it's when you say it's the Fuller's yeast, is that a specific strain that was got from somewhere else, or was it what's the story
the more you
behind
go
it?
back in time and look at the yeast we're using, brewers would use each other's yeast depending which one was performing best at that time. So we might use a yeast for 3 years and just keep recropping it. And if it started to misbehave in any shape or form, we would speak to another brewer and say, how's your yeast behaving? Can we have some of yours? Yeah, and that's what we'd do. Or they would speak to us and we would give them some. But there was a period of time after the Second World War where we really stuck with the same yeast and didn't look for other brewers. And then in the 70s, we did some research on this. We got some analysis done, and we sort of then decided to go into full-scale propagation. So from mid-70s onwards, the yeast has been the same, exactly the same, and we propagate it every 16 weeks or so we use it about 16 times before we replace it.
So 16 life cycles.
16 life cycles, so it's generally a week, 16 weeks.
So just for the people listening who don't understand, yeast is the only ingredient, yeast is the only ingredient in beer that you can use up to 16 times.
Well, some people use it more. Yeast ferments the sugar into alcohol and CO2, so it principally is what makes beer, what makes alcoholic drinks. And that yeast is a live, living thing, and you have to treat it with the respect of live, living things. I mean, those people who try to put their yeast into boxes and make it do things that they want it to do find lots of trouble doing that. And we like to work with our yeast. We understand it. We give it what it wants in terms of nutrients, and therefore we get nice fermentations. We get consistent fermentations, and we get a consistency to our beer. I often say to people, the real difference between, say, making something like cornflakes and making something like beer is beer is a biological process, and cornflakes is not really. Some of the ingredients are obviously a biological.
Nature's done its work,
but nature's done its cooking process. And I say, if you think about it, it's just like the difference between riding a bike and riding a horse. If you're riding a bike and you're riding down the street and you want to turn right, you'll turn the handlebars right and it will go right. Maybe 1 in a billion, something will fall off the bike and you end up flat on your face. Fine. But if you're riding a horse and you're going down the street and you want to turn right, you turn the reins right. Now, if the horse agrees with you, it will go right.
Yeah.
If it doesn't agree with you, it will do what it wants. And so You know,
It's
you
a
must.
good analogy.
And that,
You have to trust the horse, and the horse has to trust you,
Yeah.
and you,
It's
and
a
you
good-
become a team. And that's the same with the youth.
yeah, it's a relationship. If you've done what the horse wants and you've
Yeah.
given it the right, as you said,
Yeah.
respect, and you've fed it and you've done this and you've done that,
Yeah.
it sees you and
And it likes you.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very good analogy. I haven't heard that.
I'm going to use it. I'd like us to
Copyrighted.
we'll mention your name every time we say it. I wanted us to stick to the track of, or come back to what we're talking about in terms of education within the South African markets. One thing that I think there is a similarity between the UK scene and or let's just say the London scene and the Cape Town scene, is the trade or hospitality and what's happening at the moment. I worked in the sales trade for 2 years, and it was, when I was working there, it was pretty much the wild, wild west. People were starting to hear, retailers were starting to hear about this craft beer and how many taps they could get, and they just saw craft beer equal money, more sales, because that was the trend. I think we've gone through that wild, wild west stage now where retailers or restaurant owners are realizing, actually, we can't have 20 taps, especially if we're not going to sell that beer.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is that you're going to put that keg on. If it's not selling, if it's not moving, it's going to go sour. You're literally pouring that beer down the drain. So I think that's a similarity with London and Cape Town, where we're going to start getting a lot more smaller or less taps available, but that's also going to mean greater beer, better quality beer. And I think we're always trying to educate and push for education, and this is one of the reasons for the show is that people can listen and be educated about good beer, great beer. And that's, Murray and I have been talking about it. It's 2018. We want people to start drinking great beer, and we want the level of South African beer to go to great beer.
Well, firstly, I think beer is better than it's ever been in my brewing career. And it's really good that flavour has taken centre stage there. And, you know, brewers are now so important in breweries because they know more about flavour than anybody else that works for that company. It doesn't matter which department you work in. Brewers know more about flavour, and they know what. And they also know the market really well because they're out there drinking and they're meeting people all the time. And I think that's really important. But we should never forget that the retailer plays a big role in this too. They present the beer, they look after the beer. Cask beer is even harder to look after than
I can imagine that's
because it's
nightmare.
alive still, and you know it's only got 3 days where you can sell it. It's got a 3-day window. Kegs can have a 7-day window, maybe even longer for some kegs.
just for the people listening. The cask beer that's got live
Yeast
culture
still
in it.
in there.
Yeah, it's in there. So now, why is that different from a bottle that's got yeast in it?
Well, it's not really. I mean, the bottle can build up more condition and perhaps it's more fizzy, whereas the cask beer has a lighter CO2. But because it's a big volume and because it's it's opened, you would drink a bottle in one session.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you
You
left the
wouldn't-
bottle
you
30
open,
litres versus... Yeah.
So-
Whereas the cask, and sometimes the cask can be better on day 2, and
Yeah.
sometimes it can be better on day 1. Some of the stronger dry hop beers can be better on day 3 because they've got some more even bigger hop flavours in there. But what you've got to understand with the beer, and what retailers need to understand, is that there are reactions going on in beer that never stop. Yeah? So you've got to learn to actually supply the beer to the person buying it and drinking it when it's at its best all the time.
Sure.
Because then they have a great experience. And if you mistreat it, leave it out in the sun, then bring it in, even if it's a keg, you've accelerated some of those reactions, and some of those reactions could be staling reactions.
Exactly.
And they've made the beer more stale. There are some beers that are meant for aging. Yeah, some barley wines, our vintage ale, for instance, I would say is best after 10 years old. But and there's not many beers like that.
I've got one of those on my shelf,
Yeah.
just waiting.
Most beers are meant to be drunk fresh.
Yes.
Yeah, and there is a definite window where they are at their best, and that's the window where they should be presented to the customer.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not always the case. And when you have problems with throughput, they often can be too old, when somebody buys it, and therefore it's not at its best. It still might be okay, but it's not at its best. And the whole thing about brewing and retailing should be there is a window, we should hit that window.
So what are the solutions for upping that education in the hospitality? Is it, I mean, we can talk as much as we want, but I mean, is it creating organizations, creating associations in amongst the areas and providing an education platform?
Yeah, that's the mechanic of how it will happen. But what people have to realise is the retailer has to realise I have a part to play in this. And the brewer must realise I have a part to play in the education. So brewers need to go to pubs and talk, and they need to present, and they need to get their sales team understanding that as well. But the retailer has to be able to take it on board and want to take it on board.
Yeah.
The best retailers do. And also at the moment in Britain we're losing some pubs. We're not losing the best pubs.
Yeah.
We're losing the worst pubs.
Okay.
Yeah. The best pubs
Culling.
are surviving,
Yeah.
and they're doing very well. The worst pubs are not, and the market has changed. Food is much more important in a British pub now. The sheer sort of drinkers-only pub where people would go just to drink pint after pint, they're beginning to disappear because they don't supply anything else. And many people want more than just a drinking occasion in the pub.
Well, that you've segued beautifully, and on this show we always
One
look,
of
we
the
look
most
for-
used words.
Yeah.
Segue.
Segue. We love segues on this show. I wanted to chat before we hit our last beer. I know that we don't want to keep you too long. You've got a lot on your plates, so we're going to finish on the hour. But one thing I did want to segue to is future trends in the craft beer scene, and something that I've noticed, or if I can be so bold as to predict on my humble small show, is a movement towards healthy beers that could include light beers, fruity beers, beers that the consumer is going to become a bit more health conscious. Do you agree with that, or do you see any other trends that are happening?
Well, I think there is a definite trend towards that. Personally, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I can't advise people on how much they should drink.
Oh, I advise people all the time on the show.
Not drink. I have a very simple thing: is people should drink responsibly. I think it's very responsible of people to drink enough to pay my wages.
One a night for 12 months.
Yeah,
That's
night,
it.
every night. But
Maybe two.
Yeah.
Double
think-
sales.
periodically, the brewing industry goes through low alcohol phases, as does the wine industry.
Okay.
And zero. I have yet to come across one that's as good as a 4% or a 5% beer. Some of them are quite good, but if I was given the choice, I wasn't driving a car or anything like that, then I would drink the 4% or the 5% because they're better. So there is that. But of all the alcoholic products, beer, I think, is the most healthy one to drink because it's the longest volume.
Can't argue there.
And it's got the most water in it, therefore,
Yeah.
pint
Yeah.
of 4% is maybe better for you health-wise than drink some of the more concentrated spirits like wine or whiskey or whatever. So I would always think beer has a role there to play.
Yeah.
I also think ales are better at lower alcohols. They have more flavour, so 3.5% ale is far better to me than a 3.5% lager. Because the difference between ale and lager is ale is generally a much warmer fermentation, lagers are a colder fermentation, and because they're warmer, the yeasts are more active and they produce more flavour at that low sort of sugar level. So I do think 3.5% ales can be quite flavoursome. So I think, if anything, you should be drinking more of the lower alcohol Fuller's beers, packed with flavour, etc. And so, yeah, there is that trend. But I think the biggest trend is towards quality.
Yeah.
And we're moving away from just any old beer, any
Yeah.
old bit of bread, any old cheese, anything. We want the best.
Yep.
And we're willing to pay when we can afford it for that privilege, but we're also beginning to recognise when we get it and when we don't get it. And that's the trick for all the people in that supply chain to understand. So if you've got a premium product, you better make sure it's premium when the drinker drinks it.
Well said.
So you say
yeah.
to your sales team, if they want London Pride and it's not ready, tough luck. They don't get it.
Yeah.
They get it when it's ready and when it's at its premium
Yeah.
and when it's good to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's a commercial side to everything, but you have to be willing to pay. I'm not just talking about the guy paying for the pint at the end of it, but you have to be willing to pay through your distribution, through your retailing, through your brewing process to supply the beer top quality all the time. And sometimes with beer, you can say, okay, let's take a risk. Let's not quite use the best ingredient because it's slightly cheaper. And once you get into that cycle, it never stops.
Yeah.
So
Always pushing for
yeah,
margins.
And it's really a pleasure now to be struck beyond that. When the accountant phones me and said, "I've just seen you pay £55,000 for all these hops. Do you have to pay so much?" You just say yes and put the phone down.
Yeah, I do have to pay that much.
Yeah, that's the end of the story. And they say, "Okay, fair enough."
Yeah, they were,
Yeah, but they will ask the question.
Like a boss.
Quite rightly, they will ask the question. Have you been done?
Yeah.
You have to pay so much. And hops are getting more expensive because everybody's been used to buying cheap hops.
Yeah.
Because the market, particularly in England, say that the hop growing has got smaller and smaller because not as many people are using English hops.
Yeah.
And so that means the growers have always been getting less for their hops. Fullers have always paid good prices for hops, and we've tended to go for 5-year contracts in order to get people to grow the hops we want, because we realise if they stop growing them, what we're going to make our beer out of?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we have to have it.
Can I ask, going back to a question for John, when you said quality and if it's up to standard and if it serves at as it should be, it's peaking and that's when you want it to go out. Maybe quite tricky for you to answer, but the quality of your London Pride and your ESB, and as we're going to have the London Porter now, compared to how you normally drink it in London, with the travelling it's gone through, do you notice with your very educated palate on these specific beers, do you see not necessarily a negativity behind it or just a difference?
Look, there is this peak period for when beers should be drunk. Now, you're not getting our cask versions, and I've been brought up on cask beer, so I generally prefer the cask versions of our beers. But that's my particular taste, and everybody has different tastes. When I drink these in bottle, and I do, this is as good because they have, because the way they've been brewed and prepared through the filtration process, they have been prepared so they're at their peak for a 6 to 8 month period.
Yeah.
And we've elongated that peak period. Now, I think we used to, when we had the old filter and we were pasteurising, the sweet spot was between 3 weeks and 3 months. Yeah. Now the sweet spot is between 3 weeks and 9 months.
Yeah.
And we're constantly trying to control our oxygen levels to give that sweet spot. It's not the same at 9 months as it is at 3 months. Not exactly the same, but it is still good at that 9 months.
Yeah.
It is still good.
Okay, well, that's good because we just have this...
And some beers are more resilient than others. Chiswick Bitter, I don't think is as resilient as ESB, for instance.
Okay. It's just... The reason I ask is because we have... because our...
Thank you.
Our supply or what we can get here in South Africa isn't... We don't have the selection you've got in London or the selection that is in the States. So sometimes when people bring beers back, or when someone's been supplying beer here from overseas, sometimes it goes through these perceptions where people say it isn't what it was when I had it over there. I think it's just a myth. Maybe some are more resilient, maybe some aren't.
There's different settings as well.
Yeah, it goes back to these occasions, you know. The best way I can illustrate that is, I am the brewing director of Fuller's. I do a tasting with you and I say, before you've even tasted this beer, you know what, this is really good beer. You believe me.
Yeah.
Because of my position in the brewing industry, because of my position at Fuller's. Now, if I say, I am the marketing director of Fuller's and this is a good beer, you don't believe me. Yeah.
Well, a little bit of pinch
not as
of
much.
salt.
Not as much.
You're going to make your own mind.
Yeah.
And you do set the occasion, don't you? And you can persuade people that they like it, even when they don't.
It's interesting you say that.
So-
Just where our industry is, you can say that to people who are uneducated in beer and say this. Like someone said to me the other day, oh, I had this so-and-so beer, hated it. It was disgusting. And I know it's a brilliant beer, and I wrote straight back saying, I absolutely love that beer. And they were like, must have been something wrong with it because I didn't like it. And I know the next time they drink it, it will be a different...
I'm hoping, Cape Town, South Africa, I'm hoping we get more qualified reviewers. Unfortunately, at the moment, we've got guys who are just joining whatever social media platforms, and they're commenting on beer, and they're doing both things. They're promoting good beer and they're promoting bad beer. So that to me, I feel it will change now. People will start getting qualifications.
Things will get refined.
But if they've
But
got
this is a fun time, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should be too negative about what's going on in the world of beer. The world of beer is
crazy
exploding,
exciting.
and everybody's really enjoying it. And even some of the, some experimental beers we've made, I've not enjoyed, and I've said, look, this flavour's not for me. But some of our other younger brewers, I said they really like it. So, who am I to say they're wrong and I'm right? And again, why do we need 100% of people to like it?
No, it's virtually impossible to
I
get
think
that.
I like the fact that if people are doing their own thing, if they're explicit about the fact that it's my own opinion, as John says, the younger brewers really like it. He doesn't like it. It's your own single opinion, and that's good. Like whether it's a educated opinion or not. Not everyone
they
has
just
to
call
like
me
it.
an old fogey and then walk away.
We've got about 10 minutes left, just under 10 minutes left. I wanted to chat a little bit about this beer. This is when I think of porter, in terms of the Beer Judge Certificate Program, this is the flagship.
Yeah.
That's what everyone compares the porter to. And I'm hands down a porter fan. There needs to be more porters in South Africa. I think it's a hugely underrated style. Do you have a little bit of history or background on porter?
I'm glad you said that because I've just made a hoppy porter with Woodstock.
Okay.
So, and then the name we're working on at the moment is going to call it African Pride. And so I think that's really good. I think that reflects what we tried to do. So I'm very happy. So far, it's fermenting away well. And Murray sent me a message this morning. It's fermenting well.
That's Murray number 4, by the way.
in the beer industry.
There are 4 Murrays in the beer industry.
Yeah, too many.
Yeah.
There can never be enough, to be honest.
But porter is a very famous London beer. Porters and stouts originated in London because London was the first place really to industrialise brewing, and the industrialised brewing just as porter was getting popular, and therefore they made big volumes of it. They ceased being like a backstreet brewery. They became big breweries. Barclay Perkins came about. All those sort of famous English breweries in London, and London was the place to brew beer. And London, I think, at that point was the centre of the world's brewing industry because simply we made this great beer porter, and we could industrialise it and we could make it in big volumes, which meant we could export it too. But the other thing, it became so popular. It was called porter because London was full of porters delivering goods to your door or working in markets. A huge percentage of the population were employed as porters. And that is the beer they used to drink at lunchtime. So it became called porter because the porters drank this beer. And it became so popular that many breweries brought out another version of porter, a third version of porter. And they did it in strength. So there was a weaker version, a medium strength version, and a strong strength version. And to differentiate it, they called their strong porters stouts. Called it stout porter. And stout merely meant strong.
Heavy. Yeah,
it was just the strongest version of porter. And to even complicate things, one brewery's strong porter could be 6%, and the next brewery's could be 8%.
Sure.
Yeah. So it depended on the brewery. So there was no sort of rules as to what you would do, but stout porter meant that was the strongest version of porter that brewery made. And it became so popular that we started exporting around the world. One of the places we exported to was Ireland. And the Irish really loved this new beer coming out of London.
Yeah.
And they asked their brewers, could you make this beer for us? And they started to make it. But they didn't like using the London roasted malts because they were too expensive.
Okay.
And so they said to their maltsters, look, instead of producing this roasted malt for us, could you just take the barley, instead of wetting it and germinating it, turn it into malt, then roasting it, could you just roast it from day one?
Yeah.
And that will then bring the colour to the beer,
Yeah.
make it a nice dark beer. And they used that, and they found that their stouts became a lot drier because they were using roasted barley and not roasted malt. The London stouts were sweeter and maltier, and the Irish stouts were drier, and they became two distinct styles of stouts and porters, the Irish style and the London style. Of course, the London style is superior.
No, of course.
And so, the next time you see an Irishman drinking a pint of Irish stout, commonly known as Guinness, you tap him on the shoulder and say, look, do you realise you're drinking a cheap imitation of London beer?
He'll be
We
very happy.
need to weigh off
He's bound to be
how
happy.
big this guy
He's
is.
bound to be happy.
Yeah.
No,
Pick 'em wisely.
thank you for that story. I think our listeners appreciated that. It's good to see the history of beer.
Yeah.
We've got a few more minutes left. I wanted to kind of finish off with plans for yourself. I know that you're leaving Fuller's at the end of this year in October, I think. September.
Yeah.
And you're going on to doing bigger adventures. You've just recently been appointed as the chairman of the London Brewers Alliance, which it's an organization, if I'm correct, that looks after London brewers, promotes them, and tries to just, again, pick up the name of craft beer.
Yeah.
I want to know from you, is it going to be easy to switch caps in terms of going, like, you're going to put down your cap now for Fuller's, you're going to go promote craft beer, and how is it different from, the campaign for Real Ale? I mean, that's been around since the 70s.
Yeah.
So where you see yourself going with that?
Well, I mean, CAMRA is a consumer-led organisation. The London Brewing Alliance is not. It is a brewers-led organisation. I want to promote London beer. If I'm promoting London beer, I'm promoting Fuller's beer.
Yeah.
And Fuller's is the biggest brewery in London, so they have the best opportunity to take advantage of any promotion we do. And therefore, they're very, very supportive of what I'm going to do. But in promoting London beer, how do you promote it? It's not about drawing up posters or doing even radio interviews. It's about trying to make the quality of our beer good and making sure people don't get bad pints of London beer. And part of that is to educate brewers how to make great beer and be part of that education process. So lots of people want to try making beer, and they might be home brewers, but they don't know how to make beer consistently. So I want to use particularly the facilities of Fuller's to help drive that. Training is very important to what the London Brewing Alliance wants to do. And we also want to have a presence in beer festivals around Britain, around the world, which shows us as being together. So, instead of Fuller's having a stand and Beavertown having a stand, perhaps we might have two separate stands, but we'll have a London Brewing Alliance stand, which we'll have a presence on too.
Sure.
So it's doing stuff like that. It's not difficult. It's easy, really, because you're working, towards an end that you believe in.
Yeah, like-minded people.
Like-minded people. Everybody wants to do it. It's just, have you got the resource? Can you do it?
It's great.
I asked that. It's a bit of a selfish question because we're in the beginning stages of forming the Craft Beer Association of South Africa, and I'm trying to draw in as many different resources and references to other people or what they've done. But at the end of the day, it's about making the brewers good, making beer.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, making beer great again. But it's through that education. It's through using your resources and being a collective and pulling. I like to think of a word like pulling everyone up to a higher level.
I mean, that is it. I mean, incidentally, I am the Donald Trump of the beer world. And we're going to make London beer great again.
Yes.
So, but the thing is, anything to do with beer should be fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you should have a good time doing it. So
Well, I have a great time on the show.
let's try and get everybody involved having
Yeah.
a great time,
Yeah.
and let's be open. And the more I think to be, the more open and honest you are with people, the more they believe you, the more they support you.
Yeah.
And rather than trying to hide behind fancy marketing campaigns or whatever, just be dodgy business philosophies and things like that. Let's just, where we can, because we're the craft beer world, we can be totally open. We don't have to have any of that. And therefore, we can make people believers, and we can take people along as well with us. And I just love the fact that you can be so inclusive. And I've never known a brewer only to like the beers they make.
Sure.
Yeah.
They like lots of other people. I will go and visit Beavertown and see Logan Plant there and drink some of the beer. I just think, that this is fabulous beer. And like I've been to Woodstock and I thought they make, I met this brewer called Cameron and he made this coffee stout, which was fantastic.
Atlantic Storm.
Yeah, why not? And why not share that? And brewers are natural sharers, I think.
Yeah.
And natural at being
Open
inclusive.
source.
And if we take that out onto a wider stage and let the consumer see that as well, I think it's to our benefit.
I think that's a great message and way to end the show. And it's something that I've also looked forward to in 2018 is an honesty coming from brewers. There was a thing I used to say last year when I started the show. I'm sick and tired of the bullshit or the BS. Sorry for people listening who don't like that. Mom. People who are sick and tired of that, the BS that you see in the mainstream or big guys, corporates, advertising campaigns. And I think people are tired of seeing the hidden...
But you speak to some of the brewers from those big companies, and they're great brewers.
Sure.
I always say to
And
my...
nice guys sometimes.
And nice
Yeah.
guys, yeah. I always say
Not
to
up to
my
them.
brewers that come in, if you want to learn consistency and you want to learn quality, AB InBev, Carlsberg, Heineken know that better than anybody else I know.
Mm.
You go and talk to some of their brewers and they will tell you how difficult that is to achieve and how much they put into it.
Yeah.
And I think that I've never come across a brewery, no matter how small or how big, there is not something there for Fullers to learn from. And then we turn it into what we want it to be.
Sure.
We don't make beer like AB InBev. We can't do. We can't compete with them, but we can learn from them as well. And dare I say it, they could learn from us.
Yeah, you've got that program, what's it, Fullers and Friends, or Friends
Yes.
with Fullers, or...
Yeah, Fullers and Friends.
Fullers and
That's
Friends.
great. We did a six-pack of Fullers and Friends where, Fullers have lots of friends, and I have lots of friends, and we brewed with 6 of them. And then I kept getting phone calls. I said, "What? We're not your friend."
Yeah.
Sorry.
Kind of...
Yeah. Just
The next one.
You get that.
Yeah.
You get all the time.
Yeah,
right?
I get it all the time. I think John phoned me just before, and he was like, "Listen, man,
Yeah.
why didn't you invite me to do a collab brew?"
John, I just wanted to thank you very much, and I wanted to acknowledge you for taking the time in visiting us. It means the world to me and to my co-host, Mr. Murray. Thank you very much for visiting us. I do hope to have you back in Cape Town in the studio again.
Yep.
Or perhaps when the show gets sponsored, we can fly the whole team out to UK.
To Chiswick,
Yeah.
Come and see me in Chiswick. I mean, Cape Town's a great place, and from a beer point of view, there's some great breweries beginning to make great beers, putting something of South Africa into that beer, and that's what I would say more than anything. Make sure you're true to your roots. Make
Exactly.
sure you're a South African brewery and not an imitation English brewery or an imitation American brewery. You've got to be a South African brewery.
Awesome. Maza, any last words?
No, I've had a fantastic time. It's been very insightful. The depth of
Knowledge.
history and knowledge.
Washing over your brain.
Fantastic. I love it.
Cool. John, again, thank you very much. Safe travels back home.
Thank you.
Maza, safe travels back to you.
Thank you.
And to our listeners on Facebook, thank you for joining us. And to our listeners on Two Oceans Vibe Radio, thank you very much for tuning in. Next show on Tuesday. #Troy's Tuesdays. We'll be back. We've got... I actually need to confirm my guest. But I've got someone lined up. So we'll see you guys on Tuesday. And thank you very much. We're going to play out with some Rodriguez, because apparently John hasn't heard of Rodriguez. Sugarman. So this
Sugar
is...
Man. I've tried the beer.
You've tried the beer. So
Good beer.
This
Yeah.
is the song. We'll see you guys next week. Ciao, ciao. Thanks for listening, guys and girls. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just search for #BeerTime. That's #BeerTime written out in full. Hope you enjoyed the show, and check you next time. Cheers.